Welcome to the ADHD Women's Wellbeing podcast. I'm Kate Moore-Youssef, and I'm a wellbeing and lifestyle coach, EFT practitioner, mum to 4 kids, and passionate about helping more women to understand and accept their amazing ADHD brains. After speaking to many women just like me and probably you, I know there is a need for more health and lifestyle support for women newly diagnosed with ADHD. In these conversations, you'll learn from insightful guests, hear new findings, and discover powerful perspectives and lifestyle tools to enable you to live your most fulfilled, calm, and purposeful life wherever you are on your ADHD journey. Here's today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome back to the ADHD Women's Wellbeing podcast. I am Kate Moore-Youssef, I'm your host, and today we have Ryan Ridgway. Now, Ryan is a mental health and wellbeing trainer. You advocate on mental health online, you are a campaigner, but actually we are here to talk about ADHD in relationships and how you have sort of helped your partner come to terms with their ADHD, but also because of you have such an amazing insight of mental health from a male perspective, I was hoping we can sort of marry it all together and see if anyone that's listening right now can help and really kind of find some peace knowing that a partner can understand ADHD in a slightly different way. So welcome to the podcast, Ryan. It's really great to have you here.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for educating me about ADHD. So I've got a lot of knowledge from your podcast that's helped me, help Jamie, my partner, and there's increased the awareness for me because I want to show a bit of vulnerability and say I'm still learning. So if there's anything I say that isn't accurate, then please let me know. I'm not here to cause offence or say anything out of term. So I'm in your hands, and I have been listening to your podcast.
Oh, well, don't worry about that, Ryan. Thank you. And I mean, I'll give a little bit of a backstory. Ryan got in touch with me over social media and basically explained his situation and explained that his partner had gone through a diagnosis and you were sort of navigating that journey with her. And you wanted to come on and maybe talk about it from a male perspective, from a partner perspective, of how it showed up in your life. And also the fact that you have your own mental health struggles. You were just telling me before that you have OCD and anxiety disorder. And it's really interesting to be able to hear it from your perspective as well, because you have gone through your journey. You now help a lot of other men deal with their own mental health, which is just fascinating in itself. And I'd love to hear more about that. But I guess maybe just kind of let's focus on the ADHD and how it all began with Jamie, your partner, and when did you start realizing it was ADHD?
I think she's always had an awareness that something didn't feel quite right. And she'd mention, historically being labelled and judged as being lazy and procrastinating, and there was that impulsivity. And people before had labelled her with having bipolar disorder. And because that's the world I work in and what I teach, it just didn't seem to fit. It didn't seem quite right. She approached me to say, do you think that's what I've got? And I'm like, I really don't think you have. But if there's some things in your world that are causing you distress and always have done, let's explore that and let's see how I can support and what we can do.
Amazing. So, I mean, you've got a mental health training background. Why is ADHD not being talked about, interestingly? Like, why, when we're talking about addiction, we're talking about anxiety, depression, OCD, all sorts of things, it comes under the umbrella of ADHD. So, I know that so many people are going under the radar, they're being misdiagnosed, and the awareness isn't there. From your perspective, working in the male mental health arena, how much do you think there is in diagnosed ADHD? And I guess moving forward, what can we do about it?
I think there's quite a lot. I think maybe ADHD is kind of where mental illness might have been 10 years ago. If you wind back 30 years, no one talked about mental health. No one talked about mental illness. In fact, people were labeled, judged, and almost encouraged to keep quiet and hide it. And a lot of that, the harm that's done in that world is through judgment and stigma and lack of awareness. But we are seeing more people come through now being open to these conversations. And that kind of stigmatic statement that I really hate of, the naughty kid at school. That's now falling by the wayside, and people are realizing that actually that person needed some support. They may well have had ADHD. They weren't the naughty kid. They couldn't just do this or just do that. They needed support. So I think maybe there's been this shift in the world of mental health, and people are now recognizing that people need support, they need recognition, not labels, not judgment, and more people are open to that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, definitely when you talk about the stigma, I think that's definitely with, men. I mean, again, my forte is working with women, but I have seen it in my family from, a male perspective. There's been a lot of mental health challenges. Sadly, there was suicide, there's been addiction. It's so deeply rooted in my family. And, you know, for men to be able to open up and talk and be vulnerable is so hard. And we're breaking down that conditioning. And then we've got the sort of the female conditioning as well of what's going on with ADHD and how that looks. And I just do think we're on the precipice. I think what you said before about, ADHD being where mental health was, 10 years ago. If you think about even 10 years ago, being able to talk about depression and anxiety and suicide ideation or anything like that, it was so taboo. It was just terrifying. And now, thankfully, lots of celebrities are talking, people online. But there's such a long way to go, isn't there?
There is, yeah. There's definitely been a shift, and debatably for some, the stigma's getting less, the judgment's getting less, the awareness is getting more. But there's still so much work to do. And I'm sorry to hear that there's been those struggles from a mental health perspective in your world. You mentioned suicide and addiction. Really appreciate you sharing that with me, and sorry that's been a part of the journey, as it has been for too many people who felt they couldn't talk about it, they couldn't reach out for help and support, and the judgment and the stigma kind of suppressed that, especially in the data we see with regards to men. The suicide figures for men still at 76% compared to women, and the trend is that encouragement to not talk about it, feel like it's weak and it's this and it's that, and it absolutely isn't. We need to be able to openly explore this stuff and unravel thoughts, feelings, emotions, and be okay with saying this is me and it's who I am. It can be a superpower. I can embrace it, as can ADHD, and I want to share that with the world.
Thank you for that. And we do know that with ADHD, there's a much higher statistics and, unfortunately with suicide. And, we talk about ADHD, with, lack of focus and procrastination and concentration, all these things. But those are the sort of the easier sides of it. And it's the other sides, the less well known ones that sort of fly under the radar, which is what is leading to misdiagnoses, which is leading to people thinking that there's something wrong with them. And that is the awareness that needs to be brought out in both, men, women, children, adults, whatever that is. There has to be more of a conversation and an open conversation. And also, what I have noticed in my world, working with a lot of women and on the podcast, and also from a personal perspective, ADHD is 100% genetic. So there's going to be an ADHD member of your family, whether it's a parent or an auntie or an uncle, it's going to be their grandparent. And we can sort of see the dysfunction and the chaos through the family tree. And then when we get the answers, when we suddenly start realizing where it's come from, when we can start joining the dots, where we can see the addiction, where we can see, the not being able to hold down a job, money problems, so many different ways it shows up, it gives us a better understanding so we can then take more control of our lives and move forwards for the next generation.
Yeah, that's it. That deeper understanding to recognize it's person centered. It's not just this stereotypical set of behaviors that some people might have heard about. The same with OCD. People will say to me still, oh, is that where you're neat and tidy and you've got to check the irons off 20 times? And it can and could be that. That could be a good day, but it could be much, much more. And the same with ADHD. It's person centered. There's a person at the center of this. How is it affecting their life? What do they want to do with it? What parts of it they feel need to be coached on, or this or that. It's so different for all, and that deeper understanding to recognize it isn't just putting people in categories and boxes. It's a person there, it's a life, it's all the people in their world. It's a much more in-depth conversation I think we need to get to.
Yeah, totally. I mean, every single person I have worked with ADHD, they've either had this sort of the self-diagnosis or the official diagnosis. They have all been so different. The ADHD shows up so differently. It's challenged them in different ways. It's helped them in different ways. And you can't just kind of put them in this sort of like 10-point box where tick, 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 and that's how we help people. But I also think that's, to the detriment of the resources that we've got and the help that we've got, because each person reacts differently, even with medication. Just the medication alone with ADHD is so challenging for some people because I don't know, we absorb it differently and we take it differently and we want it for different things. And some medication can help with maybe like the binge eating side, and some can help with the sleep side and then the anxiety side. And it just shows how it just shows up. And the nuances of ADHD make it very hard to diagnose in some cases. I mean, going back to your partner, and I know that's what you came here to talk about, because I do think this conversation will be really helpful for anyone that's listening that is we're living with a person with ADHD. How's it affected you? How did it affect your relationship, your dynamics, and what's the diagnosis brought now after you've had that realization?
I think it would have affected our relationship a lot more if I didn't work in the world I worked in, because I could almost fight and campaign against judgment, against stigma. So whereas she'd been labelled a lot in the past, if I didn't have the awareness that I've got, then it would be easy to fall into some of that frustration. But things like the impulsivity, I mean, we make a joke out of it. I don't know if we've got a child-free weekend if I'm going to end up on a boat to France or sat in front of the TV. And I struggle with that because with OCD, I don't like change. It's the overwhelm, it's the stress, it's the inability to focus on one task. These things in a family home with two kids. And Jane's amazing. She's got a business, she's got two kids, she's done so well up to the age of 35. But it affects me more seeing her in distress, when she has those kind of periods of complete overwhelm and tears and that self-labeling and self-judging. From a personal perspective, I'm the one that will kind of get up early, and I've got good sleep regulation, good emotional regulation. But we kind of balance each other out. I'm happy to get up early. I've got OCD. One of my superpowers is I am ultra organized, ultra meticulously planned out. So that's where we balance. But it's more affected me because see someone you love, you care about, who's having these struggles, and I'll try and help or support, and nothing quite fit, nothing quite worked. When we got the diagnosis, that helped us both lots, because there was that period of acceptance for Jamie. And I've had full GDPR sign off and for confidentiality to share her story. So she's happy for me to talk about it. But when she got that diagnosis, suddenly she kind of just freed herself of that guilt and that self-judgment, that self-stigma of, oh wow, there's a reason for this. I'm not lazy, I'm not useless, I'm not all these things that have perhaps been suggested to me and said to me before. There's this kind of release, this weight was lifted, where she was like, I accept this is who I am, and that's okay. And I'm like, absolutely, that's okay. Let's work on it together. It can be a superpower. It's not something to be afraid of or ashamed of. It is a part of you, and that is absolutely okay.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, she must be so grateful to have someone like you as a partner who is so open to this narrative, to be able to talk about this, who understands this world. And unfortunately, there's so many people out there that, don't have a partner that is open-minded, or perhaps they just shut it down, or they don't believe in ADHD, or everyone's got a little bit of ADHD. We hear this a lot from different people, this sort of invalidation or the abling the situation, where it's just kind of like, oh, everyone deals with that, or everyone loses focus, or everyone, struggles emotionally. And that, once you start opening up a little bit and then someone shuts it down, it's almost like you retract even further back into yourself. So she must be really grateful that you have a level of understanding like that. But also, I know from, you sound a little bit like my husband, because he's not been diagnosed with OCD, but I do think there's a bit there. He's also, an early riser, very routine led, very, very routine led. And his traits, whatever they are, are very helpful to me because I'm the one that struggles to get up in the morning. He has, I'm not ashamed to admit it, he has every single morning since we've been together brought me a cup of tea, like puts it on the bedside table because he knows that that caffeine is going to get me up. So it's kind of like this intravenous thing, puts it on the thing. He gives me 5 minutes to drink my tea, and then I'm like, okay, I can deal with the world.
Makes me laugh so much because that me, like the whole kind of 18 months, it sounds a really short period of time, but we fit a lot into that 18 months. I'm the one making the coffee. And I think on occasion I've had to make 3 coffees where they'll go cold. I'll make another one go cold. And she started medication 2 weeks ago. And it was the first time in our relationship. And I was still waking up early, 6 a.m. And I woke up and she's there
Wow.
awake with a coffee in hand. And I was like, wow, where's this come from? This is different. And she's like, yeah, I just feel so clear-minded. She described it as so alert, but focused, but not kind of like high or
Mm.
like if you've had several cups of caffeine. She just felt really, really present
Mhm.
and clear-minded. Different.
You said the word present, and that is like probably the one word that most, clients I speak to want to feel. I say, "How do you want to feel? What do you desire out of life?" And, it's nothing huge. We don't want like millions. We don't want to do, I mean, some people obviously want to reach the pinnacle of their careers and all these different things, but so many of us just want to feel present and content. And having ADHD is the only way I can describe it is we're never in the room. We're always thinking ahead. We're always worrying about something that we've done. And we're not content because we've got this restless energy that makes us feel like we should be doing something, that we're not allowed to relax, that we're not allowed to rest. And so for her to say that she feels present on medication, that is huge. And it shouldn't be, dismissed, because when you spend your whole life in your head, or you're not quite there, or you're always behind schedule or something like that, it's a huge toll on your mental health. So I'm really glad to hear that the medication has helped. Is she tolerating it okay? How is she feeling on it?
She is. So she did the 14 days. I forget which medication, but it's the one a day, the
Mhm.
slow release.
Yeah.
14 days on 20 mil. She's gone up to 30 mil now. And we'll face some other challenges. I imagine her ADHD will evolve and it will change
Mm.
with medication. That will have an impact. So we're prepared for that. But so far, so good. I could almost see that presence in her as well. Just that glow in her eyes, that smile, like her whole demeanor had completely changed. You could see she had that kind of inner peace and serenity and ability to appreciate the moment and relax. And that was just so good to see. It wasn't about the coffee. Don't get me wrong. It's great having a coffee at 6 a.m. But to see that inner, that kind of inner peace and
Mm.
how she described it, I want that for her. I wanted to be able to feel that and embrace that peace. And yeah, it's going really well so far.
So, if you're listening to today's podcast and you're finding it really helpful, I would love it if you could jump onto wherever you're listening to the episode and leave a review, a rating. This really helps with other people like yourself find the podcast. Perhaps they are just on the beginning of their journey and are desperate for help and resources, and this podcast can really help with that. And if you are looking for further support, please do head to my website, which is adhdwomenswellbeing.co.uk. On there, I have lots of workshops, resources, information. It's both paid for and for free. My aim is to really help you and guide you on this journey and allow you to access whatever you can find that will help you where you are right now. So that's adhdwomenswellbeing.co.uk. Now back to today's episode. So, and you mentioned that she runs a business. I've just been curious, what is it that she does? Because people with ADHD, when they run their businesses, they have to really be passionate about it. And I'm interested to know if it's like a passion-led project.
Absolutely. She's a hairstylist, but they're very much into colour. She's had the first salon for 5 years. They've won awards. She's so creative with it. When she's in that creative space, she's just so passionate. And then we opened a second salon together. So it's great to see her in that world that she just comes into her own. She's in this creative space, so focused, so enjoying what she does. But the other side of running that business was things like the finances, the admin, the emails, and we'd see that build up and overwhelm her. And that's when, it should really be affected in terms of her mental health by what she'd state would be her ADHD. I just can't do the emails. I just can't focus on this or that. And that frustration would come out. And, that's when it was really hard to see, because I'd be like, I can help, I can do this, I can do that. But she just wanted to be able to do it herself and have a reason why she couldn't all of her life. So
Yeah.
yeah, she is. She's very creative.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it resonates from a personal perspective, because I was exactly the same to my husband before I was diagnosed, and I used to sort of come to him and just be, why can't I do it? Why? Why is everyone else able to do this and that? And why can they cope? And why do they not get overwhelmed? And why do I just want to like shut everything down and just like walk away? And he didn't have the answers, but he would try very kindly to sort of show me what I was good at, and delegate, find someone, get an assistant, do whatever you need to do to help in that matter. And I have to say, I've always been quite good at delegating and seeing where I do need that help, whether with it's childcare or bringing in someone to help me clean the house, or thankfully in my business, I've got an assistant now who is just amazing at all the techie bitty things. And she's fantastic. She just literally will just pick up something. I'll just, leave her a message, and in 5 minutes it's done. That would have taken me like 3 hours, but the 3 hours it would have taken me would have been tears, frustration, self-criticism, beration, anger, emotional dysregulation. And that in
Yeah,
itself is just so exhausting, where now I can focus on the stuff that I enjoy and good at. It feels like sort of similar with your partner, that she, obviously she's creative and she thrives off, all the creative side of hairdressing. But to not be able to do fundamental, what we believe are fundamental things to run a business, but I always sort of like look at it as people who, running in these huge global empires, they're not doing it all themselves. They've got massive teams, but
got
they're not
support.
told, oh, you're not worthy of running that business, or you shouldn't really run that business, even, because they've got a head of marketing and a head of accounting and all of that. But I think our ADHD negative mind that has always struggled has just gone, I talk about something called the DMN, the default mode network. And in ADHD, sort of from a neurological perspective, it's a much louder part of our brain, to which much more prone to self-criticism and this negative bias, where all we do is focus on the stuff that we can't do. So, maybe let her know about that. The DMN is a very, very strong part of our brain. You can kind of remember it's the demon, like the demon side of our brain likes to do all the talking. But actually, when we recognize it, we say, right, no, actually, I'm a shit hot hairdresser. I've got amazing clients. I'm winning awards. And not, oh, I can't quite keep up with my emails. That's when we can start reframing the ADHD.
That's it. And that's where maybe there's some similarities for me and Jamie with the ADHD and OCD, because that part of my brain, that internal dialogue that will condemn and try and mitigate the risk of anything going wrong ever, and look at it this way and that way. And when it does go wrong, it's almost like I've given my brain an impossible task. I've said to my brain, make sure nothing goes wrong in my life ever. Make sure it only ever goes right. So when it does go wrong or not how I expect, Ryan, you're useless. Ryan, why can't you do this? Can't you do that? So there are some kind of crossovers and similarities between us that we can talk about and explore together.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, moving forwards now, what's her plan now with her ADHD? Is she just happy to stay on the medication? And is she doing anything sort of like holistically where she can, support herself? Because I genuinely believe that medication can be fantastic for many people. But I do think that if we're not supporting ourselves from a lifestyle perspective, because we are prone to overworking, if you'll often spot a workaholic entrepreneur with ADHD. Burnout is much higher. We're prone to overwhelm, anxiety, worry. We also don't have that switch off from literally going, right, you've done enough work today, because there's always more. Our brains are always going, so we could always keep achieving. So I'm wondering, is she identifying with anything sort of lifestyle wise moving forwards?
100%. That's all the stuff we kind of explored before diagnosis and before medication, because that's the realm I work in and teach in. All those well-being approaches, such as mindfulness, walks in nature, meditation, exercise, good sleep, all of that stuff we tried to put in place, and she'd love it and embrace it for a little bit. But then she describes it as, I know I want and need to do that. I just can't. I just cannot, for whatever reason, connect the dots. So I believe the journey of recovery is much more than just getting good at taking tablets, whether it's mental illness or, OCD, ADHD. So now she's on the medication. She's able to enjoy and embrace all that stuff. So it's a whole journey of, if you want to label it as recovery, that's going to adapt and evolve, and we'll kind of reflect on that as it takes its twists and turns. But yeah, absolutely. Now all the well-being approaches that she tried to do before, or maybe done for a little bit, she's now fully moving into that space. And she's going to look at some coaching as well, from a woman with ADHD, because I think that relatability would be really good for us. So we're seeking that out and constantly looking to add things into that mental health toolkit. What else could help? What else is needed now, rather than that's the route, that's what I'm going to stay on. And maybe that'll work for a bit, maybe it won't, maybe it'll change, maybe it'll stop. Same with my OCD. I can't just go, right, that's my blueprint for happiness, so I'm going to stay like that, because it does. It's evolved, it's changed, it's affecting my life in different ways as life goes on and there's different circumstances. So we'll keep seeking out more knowledge, more awareness, mostly from your great podcast, and seeing what else is out there to help her live a full and happy and present, enjoyable life.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like she's living with the right person. Tell me a little bit about what you do for yourself, and I guess what you advocate for when you're speaking to other men with mental health challenges.
Trying to break down the stigma and the judgment, because still men have this inherent feeling or belief that it is weak to talk out, or they can't, or they shouldn't show emotion. But because of my background, I mean, I'm 41, and back in my day, get to say that at the age of 41, sound like my dad. Back in my day, no one talks about mental health. So I've had a bit of a rough journey. I'm that kind of middle generation. But the only tools I had back then was fighting. I'm a former professional cage fighter. I did the door. I'm covered in tattoos. And that was me projecting to the world, I'm not weak, I'm fine, when actually on the inside I was this kind of bullied, scared little boy. So what I try and encourage is, it doesn't matter what you do, cage fighting, boxing, ballet dancing, poetry. If life is going to happen at you and for you, then you need to be able to communicate, talk and share. And interestingly, it was March 24th last year that I was sectioned under the Mental Health Act for suicidal crisis. And it was Jamie that played an active role in saving my life. So we've got an incredible connection and relationship from that. So for me personally, it's continuing to learn, grow, accept and try new things. The tools I used back then won't necessarily be effective now. I need to continue to grow and evolve and consider new ideas and strategies to keep my mental illness from having a negative grip on my life, because I'll never be cured of OCD, but I can be in recovery with it where it doesn't affect my life negatively. And I've got a couple of superpowers like being ultra organized. I can live with that.
Yeah, I mean, what the listeners can't see is that you are indeed covered in tattoos and you are a very masculine looking guy. But the fact that you are so masculine and then you're able to connect to other men and you're able to be vulnerable and talk about your history and talk about what you've gone through must be an amazing way to break down those barriers, because I don't know how we've got to this point where men can feel so ashamed to talk about, they wouldn't be ashamed maybe, to talk about a physical illness, like they've broken their leg or they've got, diabetes or something like that. But when it comes to anything to do with the mind and our mental health, I don't know why, but it's just still so deemed as weak in men. And even, just for my husband again, and going back to him, is that he struggles to open up. And again, I think it is just a conditioning thing. And we're in our mid-40s, and you're right. I think we're that generation of people that we're still absorbing that kind of like put up, shut up, keep quiet, don't air your dirty laundry, whatever the words are, but you know what I mean? And so now it's like breaking it down and hopefully paving the way for, my kids, who I want them to be as open as they can if they're feeling, in any way worried or anxious. So I think what you're doing is amazing. And, people are lucky to be able to work with you.
Oh, you too. Like I said, you've helped me and Jamie so much. Pretty much all of my education around ADHD has come from your podcasts, and it helps so much hearing about others' experiences and learning more and more about it. And Jamie's a great follower of that. So what you're doing, I know, will help so many people with regards to this topic, and it's really important that we raise that awareness. So thank you for doing such an amazing thing for the world.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. Now tell me, where can people, if they want to follow you, because I know you do loads of great videos online, you've got a big following on social media, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, on Instagram, it's voice_for_mental health. And when I started that 6 years ago, it was about 700 people. It's now 85,000 people who I've taught, I've learned from, part of the mental health community. And the only thing we're trying to sell on there is that there should be no stigma or judgment around mental health ever. So we post on there regularly to try to raise that awareness. Because I think when we do that, whether it's OCD, mental illness, ADHD, when we raise that awareness, then it will drive down the stigma and the judgment.
Fantastic. Well, make sure that's all on the show notes so people can follow you and pass it on to anyone that they think might need to hear what you're talking about. So Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I hope you found what you were looking for in this conversation, and it's helped guide you towards some further self-healing, self-exploration, and most importantly, self-acceptance. And if you have enjoyed this conversation and would like to experience more of my work, such as access to exclusive live workshops and opportunities for group coaching sessions, connecting with other like-minded women, and a general feeling of belonging, please come and check out my monthly membership, the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Collective. I've made it as affordable as possible, and I offer you lots of resources and opportunities for connection and support from other women all around the world being diagnosed with ADHD later on in life. I'd absolutely love to see you there. All the details are in this episode's show notes or on my website, adhdwomenswellbeing.co.uk. See you in the next episode.